Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Harley Quinn Season 3, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. This episode has Harley and Ivy coming back to Gotham and reuniting with King Shark and Clayface and Frank, and they are, now the plans have shifted over, and now Poison Ivy is going to be the one who's kind of leading the team. Which at first I was like, has she never led this? I was like, no, I guess not. Like, anytime she's ever done anything super villainy, I guess it's always been on her own. But for like the past, obviously, 2 seasons, all she's done is like follow mainly Harley's lead. So maybe that's why Amanda Waller is like, oh, you haven't done any super villainy stuff. I'm like, they've killed a whole bunch of people and stole stuff. But I guess it's like, it's always been Harley stuff. Or maybe she's like, oh, you don't treat yourself as like some great super villain. I mean, like, because Harley likes to hype up, you know. I mean, obviously she's in love, so she's super hyping Ivy up. Like, oh my God, you're the smartest, you're the greatest, you're going to come up with the perfect plan. Oh my God, you guys are going to cream your pants once you like hear this plan of hers. She's like, it's not that great. And so I love that she references like, okay, I'm going to steal like this very like specific mosquito that's been like fossilized in like amber. And then Clayface like, oh yeah, just like in the movie Jurassic Park. She's like, oh yeah, sure. Frank's like, she's never seen Jurassic Park. She's like, Harley's like, what? How have you never seen Jurassic Park? That makes up like 60% of my personality. Why do you think I'm always making Jeff Goldblum references? And poor, like, she's like, yeah, I've orchestrated a plan for everyone for their perfect role. And King Shark's like, oh, I'm the lookout. I'm like, yeah, I mean, you're getting your tech guy just to be the lookout. And I love that Clayface, once he gave that very, very specific monologue thing about like, oh yeah, well, this cop who's about to marry his high school sweetheart is taking on an extra shift, and he just given up smoking, but he keeps the smoke around just so he can enjoy the smell. She's like, that's not going to happen. I was like, please let that happen. Please let it happen. And it happened. I was like, I know I was going to do it. I love this show. I love it. I was like, please let that happen. And, she kind of I love that though, because it's like, wow, Harley's like, even she was surprised by like, wow, my plans are wild and chaotic, yet somehow Ivy's ended up like outshining hers by a mile of just how chaotic and just like put like shabby and put together it was. They actually got the mosquito. She ended up making the serum and trying to make her Eden serum, try to resurrect the plants underneath. And the one that came out looked fine and everything, and then it got super buff, and then it exploded and died. Well, no, it was getting ripped and mutated, because the way it would start bulging up like that, I'm like, oh, it's just going to explode. No, it kept mutating more and more, and was like, oh, she's like, oh my God, I'm going to throw up. And then it jumps in a vat of like acid or something to kill itself, and Frank's like, I'm not going to repeat everything that it said, but that thing fucking hated you. I'm like, oh, that thing killed itself just to get away from you, and Ivy's kind of isolating herself. And I love the parallel between everything going on with the villains along with everything going on with the Bat family, because Nightwing is in town, and I'm like, oh, are they doing that just because it's like, I mean, obviously it's the Bat family and everything, but I'm like, a part of me wonders, is that like supposed to be like a little nod to Titans? Because, well, Nightwing came back to Gotham last season on Titans, so it's just like him and the Titans, so... And he's doing the deep voice thing, and the Bat is calling him. It's like, why are you doing that deep voice thing? And it's like, oh, he obviously getting introduced to Batgirl. He's making a point of like, I'm Nightwing. Like, the fact is that he's trying to assert his dominance, his independence so much in this episode. I'm like, is that supposed to be like a play? It feels too much like it's a play on Titans. I mean, maybe that's probably always a part of like Dick Grayson's story, regardless. But the fact is that they really like leaned into it. This episode makes me feel like it feels a little too coincidental. It feels very much like, no, that's definitely got to be like leaning into like parodying Titans a little bit to some extent. But I just thought that was really, really interesting. And they're taking on Firefly. And what kind of reference did he ended up making? He made some traditional family reference, and one of Firefly's goons is like, oh, or maybe he didn't grow up in a traditional household or something like that. Because I even love when you look at the credits, it's like woke goon. But yeah, they're not the well-oiled machine. I wonder, are they going to go? Because I didn't know that was a traditional thing in the comics. Because I thought the whole like Starfire and Dick Grayson thing. I thought that was the typical thing in the comics. Apparently not. The typical thing, I think, is Dick and Barbara getting together. So I wonder will the show lean into that too, just like Titans did. Because apparently I didn't know this. Because I guess because my perception was Teen Titans was my perception of like Dick and Starfire's relationship. I thought that that was more classic. But I mean, it's classic because apparently that's something from like the 70s and 80s comic book wise. It's not like the typical relationship. And I was like, oh, because I always pushed for that, but I didn't know like Barbara and him were like the more, I guess, traditional relationship. Maybe. I don't know. Once again, not well-versed comic book wise. But either way, just thought that was kind of interesting. I wonder will this show kind of lean into that or not. But I do love that Harley and Batgirl ended up getting the same idea of like, oh yeah, this bonding, even though like it's like, oh, she's like, I just got this great idea. They're like, you're gonna make us do that escape room from the commercial we all just heard. She's like, no, I'm not some sponge who basically just listens to whatever comes on TV. So sadly, they all ended up getting separated. And I love it where Clayface is talking about the Thomas Wayne movie, and Bruce is like, what Thomas Wayne movie? I was like, yes. I was just asking how is Bruce going to feel about this, and he's finding out. He's like, oh, them doing it over and over again. I was like, oh, I love the meta joke of just like, yeah, they're making a movie over and over again. He's just like, yeah, like those pearls, those damn pearls. Well, I mean, we get it already. Crime Alley and everything. I was like, I love it. I love taking that joke and just flipping it and using it as sadly more personal trauma for Bruce Wayne, because that's literally the internet's thing of like, Jesus, I never want to see the pearls again, and using that joke to be like, that's my trauma that people are monetizing over and over again. We get it, Crime Alley. That's got to be so wild, because like obviously they're not Batman movies because no one knows Bruce Wayne is Batman except for like some of the villains, but like in this continuity it's got to imply like, right, I mean, I guess it'd be like someone famous, like someone making a, like rebooting, like a very tragic, like celebrities passing over and over again every couple years and recreating it. It's like, it's gotta suck. I mean, which is ironic too, because last episode just recreated it in the form of rats. So that had to like feel a certain way. I also completely forgot about Alfred and the macaroni. I completely forgot about that. Because I love that everyone else has got a vehicle except for him. It's like, she's like, and Batgirl's like, oh, you can ride with the macaroni. He's like, fuck the macaroni. So, obviously, but Batgirl and Harley's being like, oh my god, did you team building? Like, yeah, I know. Oh, those commercials, it was so catchy. I know it was so catchy. I love them bonding like that. It's so cute. Also, Damian being such a little shit that his father's over there opening up about his trauma. What does he just do? He just pulls out a handheld video game and starts playing. I was like, you disrespect. He's talking about your grandparents, you asswipe. And then, like, of course, the two people who had the hardest time connecting ended up getting stuck together, Ivy and Nightwing. And he ends up playing the chess match, ends up winning, but then, like, he ends up feeling like such a failure, and he starts kind of beating himself up. He's just like, he references like, like I tried to go out on my own, and what was it? Vigilante ended up killing Blockbuster, and she's just kind of like, he's like, it was a pretty big thing in Bloodhaven, and it's like, I just don't want, I hope Bruce and them don't find out. It's like, well, if you think it's a big thing, if it was such a big thing, wouldn't they already know about it? So, and he's just like, I'm just gonna kill myself. And she's like, wait. She's like, I figured it all out with him just kind of talking about all the stuff about failure and stuff. She's like, right. All Riddler said is we have to do the checking, not that we don't have to be the ones doing the checking, mate. And then she just pauses for a second. And she's like, yeah, I'm gonna kill myself too. But luckily, it all worked out. Both of them ended up growing so much more because of it. And now now Ivy's like, wow, you really helped me move past my issue of like, trying to be just so perfect, Harley. I don't know how you planned it. She's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but yeah, sure. You don't have to be perfect. We'll have your back no matter what. And obviously, things didn't go too well on that front because they tried reanimating the stuff, the prehistoric stuff below Gotham. It didn't work yet again. It exploded, and I love Frank being like, "Oh my god, it went in my throat." You're like, ugh. I was like, how is you guys getting covered in that and not affecting it? Okay, yes, it does. I guess everyone got splashed except for Frank last time. This time he did. And now he's like super, he's like, I am a god. He's got full-blown arms and legs now. So I was almost wondering if they were going to make him like a full-blown, like, oh, he looked even more human. I thought that's what they were going to go with, but no, it turns out not. So that seems like that could be an issue. The place got destroyed. I mean, now Bane doesn't have to blow it up because of the whole wedding being called off thing, because he wanted the posture maker back, but they refused to give it back to him. He wanted his revenge, try to buy stuff. And I love that it's like your card has been declined. There's been like some because there's been some weird activity on his card, so he has to go to the bank to figure that out. And it's like, wait, you're giving all my stuff to Calendar Man? I was like, that's Calendar Man? I was like, wait, does he have a costume in the comics? Holy shit, I just looked it up. I never knew he had a costume. The few times I've ever seen him, he's been locked up, obviously, because I think he makes cameo appearances in like I want to say Arkham Asylum. I don't know if he's in any of the other ones, but like obviously made a quick cameo in the Suicide Squad, and but I'd never seen his costume before, because I guess most times he is just locked up in prison. I was like, that's such a and a lot of those pictures I saw look like older comics, so he probably hasn't had that must be like a deep cut, maybe, because maybe he hasn't had the costume in the comics for a long time. I don't know. I did just a quick Google search. I was like, that's weird. He didn't see like one of those villains that had, I mean, I guess it's like, right, you see the Riddler out of his like uniform a lot of times. I mean, even in the show, but still, it's just, that's wild to me that's a comic accurate costume. Of course it would be. Of course that's something they wouldn't be making up. But man. And then Bane goes to the bank, and it's just like, oh yeah, all these charges. It's like, oh, you got like this burger at 8 o'clock. You got another burger at 9. He's like, okay, yes, I like them a lot. Then it's like 100 and something of like, you got a whole bunch of hard seltzers or something like that. And she's like, I'm just a bank teller. But she's like, are you depressed? And he's like, no. And he starts thinking about it. He's like, maybe I actually am. So maybe my identity was stolen by myself. I was like, how very existential. And then obviously he felt nothing watching the mall explode. He's like, maybe I should get a therapist. It's like, oh, poor Bane, because he's also the person who's the butt of everyone's joke. Like every other villain treats him like shit. He's always been like made fun of. He's always been someone's stepping stool. So there's probably like a lot he needs to unpackage there. So, but I love this episode. Like I said, just the parallels between everything with the villains and the Bat family, and even Nightwing being like, no, I'm happy to be part of the family. I'm Nightwing, and just Damian just be like, you're still a dickweed or something like that. So, and rolling with the macaroni, it's like, so it's like, hey, not just Nightwing, member of the Bat family. I was like, oh, that's cute. I mean, it feels like a nice juxtaposition considering like the Bat family is kind of in shambles in Titans to some extent because everything that's going on. I even love Ivy making reference like, oh my god, I'm gonna die with the 8th Robin. He's like, I'm the first. It's like, yeah, it kind of put some respect on his name for being the first Robin. So either way, I'm very, very excited to see where the next episode takes us. I'm assuming we're continuing with this Frank debacle and what that ends up looking like. And yeah, Ivy was all about like, yeah, I'm gonna accept failure. It's like, we'll see how this plays out, whether Frank starts power tripping now or not. Because he ended up saying something interesting where he was like, yeah, I've known Ivy for 20 years and she didn't involve me in the plant-based plan, even though I'm a plant, so now maybe Frank is going to finally get some respect on his name or something. So we'll see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good